Hey guys, Vince here with the Rig Doctor, and today we're going to talk about pedalboard signal chain. I see way too often where my clients contact us and they just don't know what order to put their pedals in. There's all this wrong information on the internet, so let's clear it up. So we're going to talk about all the different types of pedals that can go on your board, what order to put them in to get the best possible tone, and why that is. So let's get into it. So today we're going to go over all the possible pedals that can be on your board, from your buffering to your compression to your overdrives, your modulation, your time-based effects, and everything in between, so you have no reservations about where these pedals go in the signal path. Now, there are some things here where I kind of consider them to be hard and fast rules, but that's really not the case for everybody. You have some flexibility and you can experiment as much as you want to get the best result for your own setup. And at the end of this, you'll have a diagram to reference so you can do this at home confidently. So first up, as to be expected, is your buffering. Now this is often the most overlooked part and arguably one of the more important parts of a pedal board. So what it does is it conditions your signal so your guitar can hit your pedal board using a long cable, you go through all of your pedals, and then you have an output buffer that drives that signal back to your amp. Now it does this without any tone loss, any high-end tone suck that may come from not using a buffer. So if you're using a 20-foot guitar cable to your board and another 20-foot back to your amp, an input and output buffer are going to be incredibly important to preserve your tone. Now it's really important that when you buy your buffer, you're paying close attention to the specs on it. Ideally, you want a buffer that has a 1 meg input impedance and 100 ohm or less output impedance. Now this is really important because there's no standard for buffers out there, so you have to pay attention to the specs. So an input buffer and an output buffer with these specs will drive the long line to your pedal board and the long line back to your amplifier without any high-end tone loss, any tone suck whatsoever. So make sure that when you're buying your buffers, you check the specs and that you're actually purchasing a quality buffer. Now in line with buffers, it's really important that we talk about impedance-sensitive pedals. Now these are your vintage fuzzes, your wahs, your treble boosters. They just do not play well with buffers, so they have to be before the buffer. If you place them after the buffer, they're just not going to play right. So make sure you place them before the buffer. Now in this case, they're typically going to be true bypass, so they're not going to have any negative effect on your tone. And most people that are running them really aren't running more than 2 or 3 at a time anyway. So if you have a fuzz face style circuit or a tone bender style circuit, anything like that, it needs to come before the buffer. So next up in our signal chain are tuners. Now this may seem self-explanatory, but tuners need to be as close to the guitar as possible to get the most accurate result. And I don't think I need to tell you how important that is. So the more pedals that your guitar is feeding through before it hits the tuner, the more of a chance there is that your tuner is not going to work as well as it could if it was up front. Now the caveat to this is that some tuners have built-in buffers that are quality, like the TC Electronic Polytune for instance. So in this spot, you could double up and have your buffer and your tuner in one pedal. Now this may not apply to everybody, but this may save you some space on your pedal board. So far we have our impedance sensitive pedals, we have our input buffer, we have our tuners, and next up would be dynamic effects. Now dynamic effects include your pitch shifters and octavers, your filters, your wahs, your synth pedals, and compression. These all respond directly to the dynamics from the guitar and your playing, so these need to live up close to the guitar signal. Now there is an order that I recommend placing these pedals in, so that way you get the best possible result. However, like I said earlier, it's up for experimentation. You have some flexibility depending on the sound and the tone that you're going for. For me personally, I like to place the pitch shifting pedals first. Because it has to do with pitch, I want an unprocessed signal going into that pitch shifting pedal, so that way I'm not getting any craziness or wonkiness coming from it. It's going to track the best if it's up front right after the tuner. So that way everything sounds good and it's not feeding through any unnecessary pedals before it hits it. After that, I like my wahs, my synths, and my filters. These directly respond to your playing. So if you have a less processed signal feeding into these filter effects without any dynamics changing in that time, you're going to get a better result from it. So this would be your wahs, your envelope filters, your synth pedals. All of that to me is going to track the best and get the best result if it's coming right after your pitch shifting pedals, but before your compression. After my filter pedals, I like to put compression. Some filter pedals, depending on how heavy-handed you are with the controls, the dynamics can change pretty quickly and dramatically, where a compressor after it is going to even it all out. Now, if you place a compressor before a filter pedal, it's going to change the dynamics that are feeding that pedal, and you're going to get less dynamic range, and it's just not going to respond the same. So if the compressor's after, you can feed all of the unprocessed dynamics into that filter, get the full range of the effect, and then even it out after with a compressor. So the caveat with your dynamic section is that these pedals can be placed after your overdrive and distortion if you prefer that sound. You have some experimentation here as well, but personally, I think you're going to get the best result if you place them closer to the guitar before your overdrive and distortion section. So far, we have our impedance-sensitive pedals, we have our buffers, we have our tuner, we have our dynamic pedals. Next up are overdrive and distortion pedals. Now, to me, this is where you can be the most creative and have the most fun. Now, I've seen boards with 1 overdrive, I've seen boards with 10 overdrives. There is no limit to what you can do here. Now, the order of these overdrive and distortion pedals does not matter if you're not stacking any of them. If you're just using 1 overdrive and you're just using it to push your amp further, order doesn't matter. If you're using multiple overdrives and you're never stacking them, the order does not matter. Now, when you're stacking these overdrives, this is where the order comes into play. You want to feed high gain pedals into low gain pedals. The reason being is if you have a high gain pedal and you're feeding a low gain pedal into that, all you're doing is pushing more saturation into it. You're losing clarity, dynamics, it's just going to become a muddy mess. Whereas if you swap it and you feed high gain into low gain, you have more headroom available to you. You're not going to lose that clarity, you're not going to lose that high end. It's usable, it actually sounds good. So highly recommend high gain feeding into low gain, and you'll maintain the most clarity that you can out of this section. So next up after your overdrive and distortion section is your boost and EQ. Now, to me personally, I like to do EQ feeding into boost. Now, an EQ has multiple uses. You can use it to surgically EQ things. If you need a little bit of a mid push to cut through a mix in a live scenario, it's great for that. If you're switching guitars and you just need to re-EQ things a little bit, say you're going between a Strat and a Les Paul, it's great for that. Some EQs even give you a level control, so you can even use an EQ pedal as your boost. So for me personally, I like the EQ before the boost, because if you do it the other way, a boost will kick more volume and more signal into an EQ, and you risk possibly clipping it. Now, with a boost pedal, there's 2 uses for it. You can either use it as a solo boost or volume boost if you have it after your overdrive and distortion, or if you need it as a gain boost, you can place it before your overdrive and distortions. Say you're running a tube screamer and you just need a little bit more saturation, a little more signal feeding into it, place your boost before the tube screamer and it'll kick more signal into it. If you're playing live and you just need a solo boost, place it after your overdrive and distortion pedals and you'll get that volume boost. To me, having your boost and your EQ after your overdrive and distortion section just gives you a little bit more flexibility and control over your sound. Now, next up after boost and EQ pedals is volume. So this is a little bit of a sticky subject because there's multiple spots to put a volume pedal on a pedal board. So it just depends on the application, what you want it to do. So the first spot is up front at the very beginning of your signal path. What it's going to do here is control the amount of gain or saturation you're getting from your overdrive and distortions. It's essentially mimicking what your guitar's volume knob is already doing. Now, this is convenient for some people because if you're playing live and you just don't have the flexibility to reach down and change your guitar's volume knob and you need the convenience of a volume pedal, great, that's perfect. You can totally do that. In this case, you want a high impedance volume pedal. So if you're going to place it up front, you want a high impedance volume pedal because a low impedance is just not going to work as well here. So if you place the volume pedal after your overdrive and distortion section or after your boost and EQ, it's essentially going to serve as a master volume for your entire gain section. You're not going to lose any gain, you're not going to lose any saturation, it's just a master volume. And there's no redundancy here because your guitar's volume knob will control the amount of gain and the volume pedal can control the master volume. Now, one other option you have is placing your volume at the very end of your signal chain. This is going to serve as a master volume for the entire board. Now, most people do not need this option, but it's there if you want it. But 9 times out of 10, the most useful and versatile option is going to be placing your volume pedal after your overdrive and distortion. Now, like I was saying earlier, a high impedance volume pedal will be useful if you're running it at the beginning. If you're running it after your overdrive and distortion or your boost and EQ, you want a low impedance volume. This is going to make sure that you're not losing any tone. There's not going to be any tone suck, any issues like that. But again, to me, this is going to be the most versatile spot for most players. So let's do a recap so far. First, we have our impedance-sensitive pedals feeding into our input buffer, feeding into our tuner, then our dynamic pedals, then our overdrive and distortions, our boost and EQ, our volume pedals. Next up would be modulation. Now here's where you have the most flexibility. So in this section, this is going to include your chorus, your tremolo, your phasers, flangers, your univibes, your vibrato. Pedals like that will go here. Now, in this section, the order does not matter, much like your overdrive and distortions, if you're not stacking them. If there's no stacking, then any order will do here. But if you're going to stack these pedals, they're going to affect each other, so make sure that you're placing them in the right order based on the sound that you want. Now, you have some flexibility here because some people like to place their modulations before their overdrive and distortions. It's really just based on personal preference. There's no hard and fast rules about it. But if you're a fan of, let's say, Eddie Van Halen, who liked to put his phaser and flanger before a dirty Marshall amp, you can place those pedals before your overdrive and distortions. Mess around with it, have some fun with it. It can be really fun to mess with the stacking of some modulation pedals or even putting them before your overdrive and distortions. But like I said, me personally, I like them after because I like a really pronounced modulation effect. But this is totally up to you. So next up after our modulation section are our time-based effects like delay and reverb. Now the order here doesn't necessarily matter. It's totally up to you. It's personal preference. But traditionally it's delay feeding into reverb, but you can swap it and feed your reverb into your delay. If you do it that way, the reverb artifacts and the characteristics from it are going to apply to the delay trails after it. So with this one, have some fun. You've got some flexibility here and just do what sounds best for you. And coming after our time-based effects is an output buffer. So what this is doing is driving that signal from the pedal board back to the amp. You can use a 20-foot cable and you won't have any tone suck issues. This isolates the guitar from the pedal board and the pedal board from the amp. So it just makes sure there's no impedance issues, there's no tone suck issues. So make sure that you have an output buffer right before you go back to your amp. So let's do a recap. From our guitar, we feed into our impedance-sensitive pedals that need to be before a buffer. If you don't have any on your board, then you're going to feed directly into your input buffer, which would be next. From the input buffer, you feed into your tuner. From the tuner into your dynamic pedals. This would include your compressors, your filters, your wahs, your pitch shifters. From the dynamic pedals, we go to our overdrive and distortion pedals. And again, you want to make sure that you're feeding your high gain into low gain to maintain the most clarity and all of your dynamics. From there, we're going into our EQ and boost. Now, again, you can mess around with the order here. You can move your EQ and boost around the board a little bit, but I like to put them here, feeding EQ into boost. From there, we go into our volume pedals. If you have a volume pedal here, make sure it's low impedance, and keep in mind, it's serving as a master volume for the rest of the board before it. So you're not going to lose any gain or saturation, you're just losing volume. From there, we go into our modulation pedals. Keep in mind with this as well, modulation can be before your overdrive and distortion depending on the pedal. It's based on personal preference. So you can mess around with the order a bit here, you have some flexibility, you can experiment a little bit more here. From there, we go into our time-based effects, our reverb and delay. Same thing applies here. You can do delay into reverb or reverb into delay. I highly recommend messing around with both and seeing which is better for you. And then to final it out, we hit our output buffer, which drives the signal from the pedal board all the way back to the amp without any tone suck. And doing it this way will make sure that your signal should, for the most part, sound the same as if you were to plug your guitar directly into your amp. So I highly recommend following this. This is essentially a beginner's guide to signal path order, but this can apply to everybody. And like I said in the beginning, you have some flexibility here. You can experiment a little bit, mess around with the order. If you're doing shoegaze, then maybe you want your delay and reverb before your overdrive and distortion. If you're playing Eddie Van Halen, then maybe you want your modulation before your overdrive and distortion. You've got some flexibility, have some fun with it, and experiment as much as possible. And keep in mind too that if you do need one-on-one help, that you can go to therigdr.com and book a tone consultation with me, and we will sit down, have a 1-hour consultation, just you and I, and go over your specific board. We can go over troubleshooting, we can go over signal path. If you need help with MIDI or switchers, we can do all of that. I'll also include some links down below for buffers that I recommend, as well as the materials that we offer on the Rig Doctor, so that way you can buy them and get started on your pedal boards at home. If you guys do have any questions about your specific rigs, throw them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. But keep in mind that I will be making videos in the near future on more advanced signal paths. So 4 cable, 5 cable method, wet, dry, wet, ampless rigs, bass rigs, all that's coming out in the near future. So if you have any questions pertaining to that, just keep an eye out. I thank you guys for tuning into this, and I will see you in the next one.